Welcome back to Breakthrough, a Dale Carnegie podcast. My name is Faith Wright, and my co-host is Neville DeLucia, and we are excited to be back again for another episode with our wonderful guest, Josiah Hall. Whenever I met Josiah, the word that stood out to me was dedicated. He has showed dedication, specifically the past 4 or 5 years in college, in entrepreneurship, and staying dedicated and serving where he feels his passions lie. So we're happy to have him on the podcast today to shed some light on what it takes to serve and the impact of that throughout college. So Josiah, thanks for coming on here and being our guest. What is the number one thing that you learned from your time at Neighbor to Neighbor in serving in college?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I had a really unique opportunity. This was kind of opportunity through Young Life, which is, a pretty big ministry throughout the country. But serving at a nonprofit in the inner city like Neighbor is not something that is common, right? So I'm very grateful for that. I think the thing that was probably the biggest impact on me was I was with a group of high school and middle school boys for 4 years throughout college. So that was a commitment, like after classes and after school during the week, fall, spring semester. So there's never like a lot of leeway in terms of time. And I think because of that, right, this wasn't like some passive commitment. I think because of that, that's why I saw a lot of seeds planted, and I was able to see them grow, just in terms of their personal development. Youth that are in tough situations by any measure, and I think it's that level of involvement that I was asked to do is the reason why the fruit of that was so special and so unique for me personally. So
I love how you said there was like this commitment over a period of years, right? Not just a couple of weeks. There
right.
must have been times maybe where you felt, oh, if I gotta go. I mean, and how do you keep yourself motivated? I mean, if you think of our audience or young adults and maybe some educators and parents thinking, oh, I just got to get through this next day or this next week. How did you keep yourself motivated or on task? What were some of the things going through your mind, if you wouldn't mind sharing?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think if you're not feeling that way, then you're probably not like challenging yourself, especially like in a setting like that where like setbacks and like frustration and just like the amount of time is a burden on you, right? I think that probably what motivated me to keep going. Um, I think I grew up, with parents and mentors around me that were involved in similar service opportunities for like people in those situations. And I've seen from afar that, like showing up is like 90% of the job, right? Whatever happens when you get there, like you can figure that out, but just keep showing up. And I was able to see that from people around me. So I'm grateful for that. And then I think just in college, when I did show up, when I did push through, when it wasn't the easiest thing, there's just really cool moments and special opportunities that only come when you're really pushing through something, because that's what they see, right? They know that you don't have to be there. So yeah.
Absolutely. I love how you said showing up is 90% of the job. I
I'm
want
like,
to quote
man,
that.
ding, without a doubt.
I want to quote that. That is so good, because a lot of times people think that they have to be at the top of their game in order to show up. And it's just like, no, like even on the maybe crummy days where you're not feeling so great or you really don't want to be there, just showing up for people and getting your foot in the door where it needs to be and putting yourself in places where you can serve others. That is such a good heart posture, Josiah. And I was wondering if you could share about just a service mentality, because maybe people that are in college are in the what's in it for me instead of how can I give to other people. So if you could just talk about that service mentality for a second, what does that truly mean to you to be there and say, hey, these kids might not have anything to give back to me, but I'm still going to pour into them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will say this, that there's totally a part of this that 100% does it for me, right? And it may not be in the ways that you're thinking, um, because I know, like, after having been involved in this for 4 years, that the way that it changes and shapes me over periods of time is like something that I want to experience, right? But I totally hear what you're saying, that like when I go there, I just feel like I'm always pouring out and giving, and like sometimes it doesn't feel like you're getting a lot back, right, on a day-to-day basis. I just think the posture of really trying to create kinship there is
Mhm.
what I've been able to learn from mentors, and kinship being like kind of going back to like when you don't feel 100%, you still go because that's creating real community. When those kids see you, as yourself, and you're not performing, there's bonds that are created. So I think trying to create kinship with people who are showing you their true selves a lot of the time. Like they're not putting on a show to be the most behaved or the best listener, or not cursing or saying stuff like that. So I think that posture of kinship is something that really clicked for me in the latter half of college.
What I think is amazing at too is that when we persevere through these things, we develop this resiliency, right? Hey, I can no matter what. And Faith and I will often engage with organizations and individuals, and they'll say things like, I need to be more resilient, or teach me how to be resilient.
Sure.
But really, you've got to go through these difficult and uncomfortable moments, right? So could you maybe share an example of maybe an uncomfortable moment where maybe you really had to focus intentionally and say, I've got to get through this, just to make an impact, or just whether it's your business or whether it was serving, just think of a time. Maybe you could share an experience.
Yeah, I might go business route here with the junk removal business that I started when I was in high school, because that's like the first thing that comes to mind when I think about that. So during COVID, and I'm sure you guys, hear a lot of these stories. Obviously, a junk removal service business, when you're in someone's house, um, you're not going to have any opportunity to go work during the heart of the pandemic, right? So I was shut down. I wasn't working, and that was okay. Like, everyone was doing it at that point. But then kind of the shift came when summer of 2020, where things started opening back up. Businesses are like trying to figure out what the deal is. And I was home from college because we had gotten kicked off campus at that point. And I was kind of like, hey, like, this is a pretty good point to say, I don't know if I'm going to keep this business going that I started in high school throughout college. Like, maybe I just need to change direction here. Like, it's literally a pandemic. Like, I haven't invested that much time to it yet. Um, I don't know where I go from here. So that didn't really sit well with me. I was kind of like, man, like, it hasn't been that long, but like 3 years of doing this already, like, I would really hope I could keep this going and see where it goes. So that summer ended up being the highest grossing revenue summer. It wasn't even close, right? So it totally shifted because we went from zero demand to like very high demand because everyone was home doing these projects and they were clearing out everything. Um, so I was able to take advantage of that with my business through basically changing everything. We were very mom and pop business when I started in high school. You know, small trailer, like we had insurance, but like we didn't really have it on anything. Like I got some licenses, but I probably don't have everything I have. And I was like, you know what? If we're gonna do this, let's do this right. So got on Google AdWords, made like a legit website and all that. And that was during a time where the demand was next to nothing. But then as we got that stuff in place, the demand really took off and we really kind of scaled it.
Love
Josiah,
that. Love
that's
that.
awesome. I love that. How was it starting a business as a high school student? Because let alone in college, most people
Right.
wait until, after. What made you be like, I'm going to start this in high school and not care about what other people thought of you or the potential fear of failure? How did you go ahead and start despite maybe those limiting beliefs?
Sure. I think that I started with a buddy in high school. We were best friends. We both had, just like pickup trucks as our personal cars. And we were just like, I'm tired of working at Auto Bell or mowing grass. Like, let's do something a little higher margins, right? So we just started that. We would go with flyers around the neighborhood. We'd put up yard signs. We'd hand out business cards to people at school and tell them to tell your parents. So it was the best experience. Like, even in high school, we were having so much fun, and we didn't care how much money we were making or how much time it took. Like, we were like, we're running a business, and we were in some ways, at least. So we'd go to school. I would have a bunch of junk, sofas, appliances. I'd have it in the back of my truck while I was in the school parking lot, and after school, I go straight to the dump. And then before school, with what we picked up the night before, I'd go to the dump. I'd be like 10 minutes late to school every day in my senior year. But yeah, it was the best. And during high school, I was playing basketball too, so it was a lot to manage. But having a partner at that time was great. He went to the Air Force when I went to college, so he's no longer doing it. But I'm starting it with a partner, and just having all those cool experiences with him was really special.
Yeah, it's amazing how when we look when we grow through 2 or 3 years and we look over our shoulders and we realize, man, those hard times are actually the times that
Yeah,
I'm starting to appreciate a bit more. It's like it's those rough, hard edges times where we had to fight through and struggle that really makes us, I guess, develops that resiliency, forms our
sure.
personality, and allows us to learn some critical skills. One of the things I'm admiring is listening to there's often a temptation to say, hey, look, I'm making some money. I've got this business on the side. Hey, I can maybe just pull back on my schooling. I can maybe slow down. I can maybe, instead of doing college in 4 years, maybe do a fifth year, maybe do a sixth. I mean, from that, but you were focused on, hey, I'm doing my schooling. I'm doing this business. What advice would you have for someone that's maybe got a business, going to college? I mean, you seem to stay through it all. I mean, what advice would you give some of our listeners that are maybe thinking, I want to stop going to school because I've got this business, I'm making some good money? What would your advice be based on your experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will admit that there was a point in time in college where we were scaling this business, and they crossed my mind of like, hey, like, am I going to go back to school? And this was during like COVID, so things were a little bit bizarre and everything.
Yeah.
But I do not regret at all staying for 4 years. I got a business degree in supply chain, and I did well. I didn't have a 4.0, but it wasn't, a 2.5 either. So I was like, if I'm going to stay in school, like, I'm going to give it my best. And then whatever that looks like for my business, I'm also going to try to give it my best. But also acknowledging that, like, it's hard to do two important things with your best. But I think juggling a lot of different things is probably one of my gifts. And like, sometimes I don't like it, but like, I can kind of figure it out. So that's something I'm trying to work through as well. But I do think that, like, if that business was bigger, or if it was falling by the wayside during school, I would have had a tougher decision. But I was grateful to where I could more or less keep track of everything, and feel like I'm still doing school and my business with excellence, as well as serving people during college. So I was definitely at full capacity, but just kind of taking a step back from that every few months to ensure that, like, hey, like, I need to make sure I'm getting this degree and doing that with excellence.
It's great to hear your focus there as well. I mean, Faith, as you're listening, you're focusing on work, you're focusing on your schooling, you maintain a grade that's important. I think sometimes that's the reflection that we need to have as well. So, wow, it's awesome. It's inspiring, actually.
Yeah, it is very inspiring. And I get the juggling of lots of plates, right? I was a college athlete, and so I feel like being a college athlete is one thing with balancing time with workouts, and it's different from entrepreneurship, but I get the
Sure,
juggling plate.
100%.
100%. And I'm curious to know, is there a breakthrough moment for you in college, or maybe within the past few months, personally or professionally, that stands out to you, that really impacted you?
Yeah, I think maybe this isn't like too like specific, but I think it probably my sophomore year at college, I was listening to another podcast, and the words of like, no person is earning their love or earning their admiration for others from what they do. And that was like a big part of my story, to that point of like everything I did, like I gave it my best. I worked hard, I enjoyed it, but like a lot of it was trying to earn love or earn appreciation or earn support from my parents, from my mentors, from my friends. And that was not the healthiest thing, even for a high schooler or a college student. And just kind of taking a step back and like hopefully breaking through that lie that I told myself, and like that I still tell myself at times, but I have that awareness now of, I have worth, I have value outside of any success I have or anything I do. And that doesn't mean that I don't give my best to things, but that's not where I'm getting my intrinsic value from. So that was a big moment for me, personally, but that obviously translates professionally.
That's a huge moment to come into awareness. How do you feel like that has changed the way that you work now, knowing that your identity doesn't come from what you do?
Yeah, so that's the cool thing. It could sound like, well, yeah, now I just kind of do whatever I want, and if stuff works out, it works out. But that's not the case. I think what it did for me professionally is that it gave me a lot more freedom to put myself out there and to make mistakes and to fail, because I'm less focused on what these random people think about me from a distance, right? So that has helped me professionally because I haven't lost the work ethic or the determination or the drive. That's just coming from a little bit of a different source now, and I'm not comparing myself to others or to my past successes or failures constantly now, right? So that's been a big help professionally.
Yeah, in the business world today and in corporates, I mean, people often talk about imposter syndrome. You
Yeah,
live to the expectation of others, right? And to hear you have the self-awareness so early in your career, fresh out of university, college, and you are, having success in facets of life, knowing that there are hardships that you have to overcome as well. Because oftentimes, and I often reflect when people say things like, well, you're so lucky. Neville, you are where you are because you're so lucky. Well, actually, it took a lot of hard work, determination, there was perseverance. But as you reflect on that, there must have been a person or an individual that maybe gave you that helping hand, or maybe that gave you a bit of guidance. And if you had to reflect back on that, who was that person for you to say, hey, man, that you could lean on in a difficult time or in a crisis of sort?
yeah, I think that's a great question. I have two great parents. They've always been that for me, and obviously, like your parents, hopefully, like kind of see through the facade that you put up to the rest of the world, and they definitely do. So that's a big one. But I think to take that question maybe a little differently, I
Sure.
think it was a specific teenager at neighbor to neighbor, named Cam, that when I was with him, I didn't feel any pressure to tell him about my 3.8 GPA or how I'm doing in basketball or how much money my business made this month. And because that didn't matter to him. Like he just cared that I was looking at him, I was listening to him, and I was with him. We spent a lot of time together, my junior year of college, when I had a lot of other stuff going on, and just to be with him and to be there for him, made me feel a lot of peace, and just like that kinship that I was talking about earlier. So I think he was someone, not necessarily intentionally, that was there for me, in that way.
Nice. I love the phrase there. Hey, Faith, he goes, be there with him and
Yeah.
there for him. It's really,
Yeah.
there's this with and for. And I think
Mhm.
kinship is such an important thing. You talk about community, kinship, all these things, and it's great because, what real living is living for others, right? So as we create that community, it certainly does help us and inspire to do that. So it's wonderful.
Absolutely. What advice, Josiah, would you give to parents or educators that are with Gen Z a lot of the time and maybe feeling similar pressures like you did, of putting a lot of weight on what they do instead of who they truly are?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think like just self-awareness and being with people who see you for who you really are and still care about you and love you. That's I think for anyone that feels that way. That's like number one thing. Also just in general, like advice for people working with Gen Z. I think that like at least some of us are really craving more challenge. I don't think that in high school or in college, I naturally found mentors or people that cared about me that were really pushing me. I found support. I found people that knew me, but where was that challenge? So I had to seek that out from other sources, and I'm grateful that I did. And I think that like now I realize like, hey, I have to have those people in my life. But if I had just, you know, not pursued those or just gone the normal route of, teachers and parents that were in my life, I think I would have missed out on a lot of challenge. I think support and caring is talked about a lot today for Gen Z, but I think some of us really want to be challenged and pushed. And that's another way to show that love and support.
Man, I could talk to you all day. I really could. It's wonderful that you're speaking around how we engage and that you find them. I made a note here, be with people who see you for who you are, and I think if we can be there for other people, it's going to really allow us to be effective. I just want to say thank you so much, Josiah, for being available and coming onto our podcast. Faith and I love meeting with people like yourself and engaging. For those listeners that are there listening to us, if you haven't already liked and subscribed, please do so now. We're bringing more people like this to engage and engage our community. And you'll find that as we launch these next episodes, we'll be inspired by the future leaders. We'll be inspired by those leaders today. So again, Josiah, thank you so much for being with us. If people want to follow you, get connected with you, what's the best way to do that?
Just LinkedIn, Josiah Hall. Yeah.
Awesome. So we'll put that in our write-up as we post this. And again, thank you so much. It's been wonderful getting to know you.
Yeah, great to meet you as well, Neville. Thanks, Faith.
Thanks, Josiah. See you guys soon.